My wife's first love suddenly had an episode, and, to vent his emotions, broke my right arm with a baseball bat. As I lay on the ground, dripping with cold sweat from the pain, Su-Ran just stood aside, holding Gu-Yi tightly and comforting him softly. Baby, don't be afraid. He still has his left arm. If you're still angry, it's fine to hit him again. Gu-Yi laughed maniacally, casually tossed the baseball bat aside, and walked away. Enduring the excruciating pain, I rushed to the hospital. However, the doctor told me that my right arm was too severely injured. Even with surgery, it would be difficult to fully recover, and my right arm would be essentially useless for the rest of my life. At my most vulnerable moment, I desperately hoped Su-Ran would offer me some comfort, but instead, I received only accusatory messages from her. Why can't you be more understanding? Brother E is sick. Why couldn't you just cooperate with him? Now look what's happened. He's back in the hospital because his emotions weren't properly soothed. If anything happens to him, I will never forgive you. After being discharged from the hospital, I felt heartbroken and decided to leave Su-Ran. But she seemed like a completely different person, desperately begging me to stay. I never thought that in Su-Ran's eyes, my pain would mean less than Gu-Yi's slightest emotion. Thinking about this, my heart felt like it was being pierced by countless needles, making it hard to breathe. Looking at my right hand wrapped in thick bandages, tears involuntarily streamed down my face. Just as I walked out of the hospital, I heard Su-Ran's voice from behind. I turned around to see Su-Ran supporting Gu-Yi standing not far away. There wasn't a trace of guilt in Su-Ran's eyes, only pure impatience. Zhang Fan, aren't you being too dramatic? It was just a light hit. Did you really need to go to the hospital? And why haven't you replied to my messages? Su-Ran questioned me angrily. Looking at this unfamiliar woman before me, I could only find it laughable. The situation now made it seem like I was the one who had done everything wrong. I took a few steps forward, deliberately holding my injured right hand against my chest. Su-Ran glanced at me and sneered. How come I never noticed you were such a good actor before? If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, were you planning to accuse EG of intentionally hurting you? That's enough, Zhang Fan. Your acting is terrible. Su-Ran's words were like sharp blades piercing my heart. The person who once promised to love me for a lifetime was now speaking to me with such hostility. You're the one who's blind, not me. Since you're so protective of Gu-Yi, there's no need for us to continue. Let's get divorced, Su-Ran. I held back my tears as I struggled to say these words. Su-Ran looked at me in disbelief, wanting to say something, but was held back by Gu-Yi. Gu-Yi put on a guilty expression and said, Zhang Fan, I'm sorry, it's all my fault. Don't blame Ran. She's done nothing wrong. I promise I won't appear before you two again when I'm having an episode. If you two separate because of me, I'll feel guilty for the rest of my life. Gu-Yi's captivating phoenix eyes, which had always mesmerized Su-Ran, suddenly turned red. Su-Ran hugged him sympathetically. That look seemed to tell me that I was the one who didn't belong. Once upon a time, I too enjoyed such devoted affection, but now, her favoritism has been given to someone else. That night, Su-Ran didn't go home, staying at the hospital to accompany Gu-Yi. Returning home, I saw the mess everywhere in the house, with Gu-Yi's baseball bat still lying on the floor, surrounded by traces of my struggle. I recalled how Su-Ran, worried about Gu-Yi having an episode with no one to care for him, brought him home despite my objections. But just yesterday morning, Gu-Yi had another episode and broke my right hand with the baseball bat he had prepared beforehand. And Su-Ran, not only did she not stop him, but asked me to understand Gu-Yi, saying he was ill. I spent the whole night cleaning, only finishing tidying the house by dawn. Exhausted both physically and mentally, I sat on the sofa and called my parents who were out of town. Mom and Dad, I've made up my mind. I've decided to immigrate with you. Let's book the flight for tomorrow. I tried to keep my voice calm. Xiao Fan, did something happen? What's going on between you and Su-Ran? Mom asked worriedly. Su-Ran and our relationship has come to an end. I didn't want to worry my parents, so I didn't tell them about how Su-Ran hurt me. Just as I hung up the phone, Su-Ran came back. She was soaking wet, with rainwater dripping from her hair, making her delicate face look even more pitiful. In the past, I would have definitely helped her dry off with concern, but now, I just looked at her coldly. Su-Ran sat down beside me and tried to hug me like before, but I turned away to avoid her. A flash of embarrassment crossed Su-Ran's face, but she still asked, Who were you just talking to on the phone? Why did you hang up as soon as I came back? If I had heard these words from her before, I would have been happy about the jealousy in her tone. But now, never mind, I was just being overly romantic. Tomorrow is our anniversary. I've made a reservation at your favorite restaurant, I said calmly. Su-Ran froze for a moment, then said with guilt, I know I've been neglecting you lately, but you know, EG is sick, and we were childhood sweethearts. I can't just watch him hurt himself. After some time, we'll go traveling together. Didn't you always want to go mountain climbing? I'll have dinner with you tomorrow too. We've been together for so many years. please try to understand me, okay? How many years? I suddenly interrupted her before she could make more empty promises. Su Ran was stunned, and after thinking for a while, she finally understood I was asking how long we'd been together. She said uncertainly, 3 years, 5 years. She became increasingly unsure, starting to act spoiled like she used to. Oh, Fan, you know I've never been good with numbers and dates and such things. Is that so? I laughed bitterly in my heart. In the past, she often forgot those important dates between us, yet I always gave her a sense of ceremony. Her birthday, all our anniversaries big and small, I would carefully prepare various surprises for her, yet she often forgot even my birthday. Today I finally understand. She simply didn't love me. If she truly loved me, how could she let me feel disappointed time after time on those special days? 6 years and 3 months, Su Ran. Su Ran's phone suddenly rang, interrupting my self-pity. Without waiting for my response, she got up and went back to the bedroom. Through the door, I heard Gu Yi's domineering voice. Ran, you said you would only love me for your entire life. Don't you forget that. Su Ran responded urgently. E.g., just focus on getting better, don't overthink things. Zhang Fan and I have been sleeping in separate rooms for over a year now. He's long gone from my heart. Don't worry, I only love you. Hearing these words, my heart felt like it was being squeezed tightly by an invisible hand, then plunged completely into an ice cellar, trembling from the cold. Outside the window, the rain was falling steadily, large droplets hitting the window pane with dull thuds, as if lamenting my current situation. Perhaps it was this irritating rainy weather, or perhaps the pain in my heart intensified my physical sensations, but the broken bone in my right hand felt like countless needles piercing back and forth, causing me to break out in cold sweat, with every breath bringing sharp twinges of pain. Unable to endure this intense pain any longer, I could only drag my heavy steps, supporting myself against the wall, making my way to the master bedroom one step at a time. At the doorway, I took a deep breath and raised my hand to knock, my voice carrying traces of weakness and resignation. I don't mean to disturb you. I just need to get some painkillers because my hand is hurting badly. After quite a while, Su Ran impatiently flung the door open with a loud bang. Upon seeing me, her face instantly showed an expression of disgust, and with a sneer at the corner of her mouth, she said mockingly, still pretending to be in pain? E.g. is a patient who can't take care of himself. How much strength could he have? Don't tell me you're using this as an excuse to get close to me. She crossed her arms over her chest, her eyes filled with contempt, speaking as if I were a completely ridiculous clown. Let me tell you, until E.g. fully wreck. Overs, I won't have any intimate contact with you. So don't waste your effort. She stepped forward, approaching me with a cold sneer of disgust on her face. I never realized before how desperate you could be. If you're feeling lonely, I can buy you some things online. Every word from Su Ran was like sharp grains of salt being ruthlessly sprinkled onto my raw wounds. I stared in disbelief at the vulgar woman before me, unable to stop memories of our sweet moments together from flooding my mind. Back then, her eyes were always filled with tenderness and love, but now, all that remained was coldness and disdain. Anger and despair surged like a raging tide, instantly flooding my heart. I clenched my fists tightly, my nails digging deep into my palms, the pain making me more clear-headed. With courage from somewhere unknown, I suddenly raised my hand and struck Su Ran across the face. I put all my strength into that slap, along with all my grievances and anger. Su Ran, do you even hear how inhuman you sound? I roared, my voice trembling with anger, my eyes reddening with emotion. Su Ran was stunned by my slap. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she stared at me, the red mark from my hand still visible on her face. The next second, she exploded like a lit powder keg. She suddenly reached out and grabbed my injured right hand with a death grip, and I could feel her sharp nails piercing into my skin. Ah! I let out an agonized scream as the piercing pain almost made me faint. I pleaded tremblingly. It hurts so much, please let go. I promise I'll never come into this room again. My voice was choked with tears. Each word seemed to be squeezed through my clenched teeth. Zhang Fan, I never knew you were such a good actor. Su Ran yanked me forcefully while saying viciously, do you think putting on this act will make me split my concern for E.g. with you? Let me tell you, dream on. Her face was filled with undisguised disgust, her eyes looking at me as if I were an utterly despicable burden. After being dragged into the bedroom, I lost my balance and almost fell. Yet she still wouldn't let me go, continuously hurling insults while her hands kept pulling at my clothes. Suddenly, chaos erupted in the room, with the sound of tearing clothes mingling with her shouting and my painful groans. Just then, she abruptly stopped, as if remembering something, quickly grabbed her phone and made a video call to Gu Yi. Once connected, she faced Gu Yi on the video with a triumphant smile, like a child who had just succeeded in playing a prank. Brother E, look at Zhang Fan now. Doesn't he look like a stray dog? He even came seeking affection. How pathetic, haha. I looked at Su Ran in horror. At that moment, her eyes were full of satisfaction and mockery, as if she was enjoying humiliating me. My right hand was too painful to move, hanging limply at my side as blood dripped from my fingers onto the floor. Yet Su Ran ignored it completely. I slowly sat up on the bed, mechanically adjusting my disheveled clothes. As my fingers touched the torn holes in my clothes, a sharp pain stabbed at my heart, as if these damaged garments were a perfect reflection of my broken life. I dragged my heavy steps, numbly walking towards the door. Looking at my state, Su Ran seemed to find a new outlet for her anger, shouting behind me. Hey Zhang Fan, I've humiliated you like this. Why don't you show any reaction? Are you mute? Don't you know how to curse back at me? Her sharp voice was like steel needles piercing straight through my eardrums. I stopped in my tracks, countless retorts flashing through my mind, as all the anger and grievances suppressed in my heart nearly burst through my chest. But I still held back, took a deep breath, and said coldly, just treat me as if I'm mute. After saying that, I didn't look back at her again, afraid that one more glance would make me break down in tears. Su Ran watched my retreating figure as I left, angrily gripping her phone until her knuckles turned white. The phone screen still showed the call interface with Gu Yi. Her breathing was rapid and heavy, her chest heaving violently. Gu Yi sensed Su Ran's emotional change on the other end of the phone and quickly said breathlessly, Ran, my chest hurts so much. I feel like I'm having another attack. Please come be with me. That painful voice, to my ears now, was full of pretense and hypocrisy. Su Ran immediately became anxious, hastily glancing at me with eyes that held no guilt or compassion, only concern for Gu Yi. Then, she rushed out like a gust of wind, leaving me alone to face this cold and broken home. I looked around this room that was once filled with warm memories, now permeated with the air of pain and betrayal. A sense of determination welled up in my heart as I frantically began packing up my belongings in the house, violently throwing items one by one into the trash bin, as if doing so could discard all those unbearable memories along with them. I arrived at the law firm, watching the lawyer busily drafting the divorce agreement, my heart filled with mixed emotions. Once, I was full of expectations for this marriage, thinking I would spend a lifetime with Su Ran, but now it has come to such an abrupt end. After leaving the law firm, I went to the hospital to have my wounds treated. Sitting in the debridement room, every movement of the doctor pulled at my nerves, and the pain made me more acutely aware of my failure. Coming out of the debridement room, I looked at my shortened right hand, my heart filled with bitterness, and my eyes unconsciously welled up with tears. Su Ran, the harm you've done to me can never be repaid in this lifetime. Once, to be with you, I gave up the opportunity to study abroad and a better job, but what I got in return was your betrayal and hurt. I repeated silently in my heart over and over again, and tears finally burst out. Walking out of the hospital lobby, the sunlight was a bit dazzling, and I instinctively squinted my eyes. At that moment, I saw Su Ran and Gu Yi. When Su Ran saw me, her face instantly darkened, and she glared at me angrily. I can't believe you're so shameless, actually stalking us. I've already said that E and I are just friends. Why are you so suspicious? Those accusatory words made me feel utterly ridiculous. If only you were half as reasonable as E. I don't know why I married such a narrow-minded, selfish, and suspicious man like you in the first place. Su Ran's words stabbed my heart one by one, like sharp blades, cutting a few more wounds into my already badly scarred heart. Gu Yi sneered sarcastically from the side. Zhang Fan, you're such a good actor, even better at pretending than my garbage bin. If Ran hadn't video called me, I wouldn't have known how desperate you were. He wore a smug look of victory on his face, and I was so disgusted that I wanted to smash his face in. It's your own fault for being incompetent, not even able to keep your woman. If I were you, I'd be too ashamed to live. Gu Yi continued, his tone gloating over his victory. I suppressed my rage, the anger in my heart surging like a tidal wave, almost overwhelming me. I sneered, not everyone likes picking up other people's trash. Since you like it, you can have it. I stared straight into their eyes, refusing to back down. Everything you've done to me, I'll remember it. Let's see how this plays out. I spoke each word deliberately, every syllable filled with determination. Seeing my firm attitude, Gu Yi started playing dumb again. He squatted on the ground, screaming hysterically. Ran, I'm having an episode again. I feel terrible. I really want to hit someone. His exaggerated performance drew strange looks from people around. Su Ran immediately became tense. She looked at me, her eyes full of threat. Can't you see he is suffering? Can't you just sacrifice yourself and let him vent? As she spoke, she held me tightly like a pair of pliers, ignoring my struggles. Gu Yi approached me step by step with a baseball bat. I stared in horror, my heart pounding wildly, struggling desperately, But it was useless as Su Ran held me firmly in place. The moment Gu Yi raised the baseball bat, Su Ran seemed to notice the desperation and fear in my eyes, and her hands trembled slightly. But ultimately, she didn't stop him. Gu Yi violently struck my right hand with the baseball bat. I let out a heart-wrenching scream that echoed through the hospital lobby, piercing the hearts of everyone present. Su Ran suddenly snapped back to reality, pushing Gu Yi away, causing both the baseball bat and gauze to fall to the ground. It was then that Su Ran saw my mangled right hand. Her face instantly turned pale, and her body began to tremble. How could this happen? It was just a prank. You're lying to me, aren't you? How could your hand become like this? Su Ran suddenly lunged forward, gripping my shoulders tightly and shaking me desperately. Her eyes were filled with terror and disbelief, her voice trembling. Only now did she seem to realize the gravity of the situation. But to me, all of this seemed so hypocritical. Due to excessive blood loss, my head felt heavy and dizzy, and my vision became increasingly blurry, as if everything before me was covered by a thick layer of fog. In my last moment of consciousness, I saw Su Ran's panic-stricken face, but felt no satisfaction, only endless desolation. When I regained consciousness, I found myself lying in a hospital bed. The smell of disinfectant permeated the entire room, making me feel depressed. Su Ran was leaning by the bed, and when she saw me wake up, her eyes instantly lit up as she exclaimed excitedly, "You're finally awake. Why didn't you tell me earlier that your injury was so serious? I'm your wife. Why did you hide it from me?" Her urgent tone made her seem like a genuinely caring wife. I looked at her coldly, no longer able to suppress the anger and grievance in my heart. When have I ever hidden anything from you? From the beginning, you chose to believe Gu Yi, turning a blind eye to my suffering. You defended him time and time again, letting him hurt me. What right do you have to question me? My voice rose with anger, each word seemingly forced through gritted teeth. Also, it's over between us. 6 years ago, you solemnly promised to love me for a lifetime. But what about now? For Gu Yi's sake, you've hurt me again and again, trampling on my dignity. As I spoke, I became more and more emotional, and my eyes unconsciously turned red. Su Ran panicked, her eyes began to dodge, and she hurriedly explained, "This was just a joke between Yi Gu and you. Don't take it seriously. Haven't I loved you enough? How can you talk about leaving just like that? You were the one who begged to be with me in the first place." There was a hint of embarrassed anger in her words, as if blaming me for being too particular about this. "At most, I'll have Yi Gu apologize to you. Stop making a fuss." Su Ran said impatiently with furrowed brows. Her indifferent attitude completely broke my heart. In her heart, Gu Yi's joke was more important than my pain, and my suffering was nothing more than an insignificant drama in her eyes. I laughed bitterly in anger, picked up my phone with trembling hands, pulled up the surveillance video from home and the recording at the hospital entrance, and threw them forcefully at Su Ran. "Take a good look. This is what you called a joke. When I was in excruciating pain, what were you doing? You just stood there, watching me get hurt, and even helped him humiliate me." My voice became hoarse with anger, and tears flowed uncontrollably. Su Ran watched the video and listened to the recording, her face turning pale. Her lips trembled slightly as she wanted to say something, but choked it back. After a long while, she finally said in a low voice, "I didn't know you would go that far. Please forgive me, it won't happen again." I laughed bitterly, my laughter filled with despair and mockery. "There won't be a next time. I won't give you another chance to hurt me. You've hurt me again and again, and now you think a casual apology will make me forget everything? You're too naive." I stared at her intently, my eyes full of resolution. At that moment, Gu Yi called, sobbing and crying. "Ran, Zhang Fan is so vicious. She's going to sue me just because I lightly hit her once. I watched the video she sent me, and I'm about to have an episode again. Please come help me." That extremely hypocritical voice came through the phone speaker, making me feel sick. Su Ran hung up the phone and looked at me angrily, her eyes full of accusation. "Brother, Yi has bipolar disorder. How can you be so heartless to send her to prison? She's already suffered enough from her illness. Can't you just endure it? Even if your right hand is ruined, you still have me, don't you? Can't I be your right hand? I'm begging you not to report this to the police, or I'll never forgive you for the rest of my life." Su Ran said viciously, her words like handfuls of salt being sprinkled on my already mangled wounds. I found it utterly ridiculous, and my anger reached its peak. How could you say such things? My suffering means nothing to you. Yet Gu Yi's few tears can make you turn against me with such harsh words. You keep saying you love me, but which of your actions has shown any love? From now on, we're done. I shouted with all my might. The flight was at 8 tonight. Fighting through both physical and emotional pain, I packed my things, preparing to leave the hospital for the airport. I couldn't bear to stay another moment in this heartbreaking place. I needed to leave, to seek a new life of my own. Just before leaving the hospital room, Either out of lingering hope or wanting to completely crush that hope, I took out my phone and opened the home surveillance feed. Sure enough, I saw Su Ran helping Gu Yi walk through the front door. My heart clenched violently, as if gripped by an invisible hand. Su Ran gently helped Gu Yi sit down, then walked into the kitchen, skillfully put on an apron, and began preparing meals for Gu Yi. Every single movement, once done for me, has now become my most unbearable memory. After the meal was ready, Su Ran sat beside Gu Yi, feeding her spoonful by spoonful, with an indulgent smile on her face. Once, she used to feed me the same way, with such love and care. But now, I'm like an outsider, completely abandoned. I can only watch their sweet interaction through the screen, as tears uncontrollably stream down my face. Gritting my teeth, my hand involuntarily scrolls through the old surveillance recordings. Each video is like a sharp blade, piercing my heart. During the days when Su Ran and I slept in separate rooms, every night, Gu Yi would quietly open the door to the master bedroom, and behind that door would be Su Ran's expectant face. All those past events that I tried to deceive myself and avoid are now clearly laid out before me, making it impossible to escape anymore. With reddened eyes, holding back my inner pain, I completed the hospital discharge procedures and went straight to the law firm. The lawyer solemnly told me that Su Ran and Gu Yi's actions constituted intentional assault, and I could sue them as long as I submitted the evidence in my possession. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings would be simple. Even if Su Ran disagreed, the court could directly issue a judgment according to law. Hearing this, my tense nerves finally relaxed a bit, as if seeing a glimmer of dawn in the darkness. Sitting in the departure lounge, I gazed out the window with mixed emotions. At that moment, my phone suddenly rang. It was Su Ran calling. I took a deep breath and pressed the answer button. He is being very generous. As long as you don't sue, he'll forgive you. I persuaded him for a long time before he agreed. I hope you won't fail to appreciate this kindness. Su Ran's calm tone was infuriating, as if all the blame lay with me. The house feels so empty. When your hand gets better, come back. Yij still needs your care. She continued speaking, without a trace of guilt in her voice. I'm the one who's injured. I'm the one who needs care. I roared in anger, tears bursting forth again. After hurting me like this, now you want me to forgive and take care of him? How can you be so shameless? Su Ran fell silent for a moment, then sighed and said impatiently, You're older than Yij. What's wrong with taking care of her? I was planning to pick you up at the hospital and take you out for a meal, but since you're being so ungrateful, forget it. Think about it yourself. Stop pretending. I won't be fooled by you anymore. I shouted as I hung up the phone, rage burning inside me. Before boarding the plane, I unhesitatingly pulled out my SIM card, threw it on the ground, and crushed it under my foot, just like crushing this unbearable past. As the plane took off, I gazed at the receding city, feeling a mix of emotions. Finally, I was leaving this place of pain behind, heading towards freedom. I arrived abroad the next day at noon. When my parents, who came to pick me up, saw my injured right hand, tears immediately welled up in their eyes as they held me tightly with concern. In their warm embrace, I could no longer hold back. I broke down crying, releasing all the grievances, pain, and exhaustion in that moment. I had finally returned to those who truly loved me. This was my real safe harbor. During my days abroad, I worked hard to adapt to my new life. As for Su Ran, after I left, she took Gu Yi to all the places we had once planned to visit together. I occasionally saw photos she posted on social media, them laughing by the sea, embracing under snowy mountains, running across grasslands. All those beautiful promises that once belonged to us, she had given to someone else. But now, I no longer feel heartache, only amusement. The deep affection I once had was ultimately given to the wrong person. A week later, Su Ran finished her trip with Gu Yi and hummed a tune as she happily opened her front door. She expected to see me greeting her with my usual doting smile, but the house was deathly quiet, without a trace of life. Zhang Fan, Su Ran called out, her voice echoing through the empty house with no response. Her brows furrowed slightly as an inexplicable unease welled up in her heart, and she quickly searched through each room. But she found that all of my belongings had vanished, as if I had never lived in this home, disappeared without a trace. Su Ran's face instantly turned pale, and she rushed out the door in panic, heading straight to the hospital. At the hospital's nurse station, she anxiously asked, Excuse me, which room is Zhang Fan in? I'm his wife. The nurse checked the records and calmly replied, He was discharged a week ago. Upon hearing the answer, Su Ran staggered and had to steady herself by holding onto the nurse station desk, her mind filled with confusion and panic. Su Ran returned home in a daze, her steps unsteady as she walked into the second bedroom. As soon as she opened the door, a strong smell of blood hit her face, and she instinctively covered her nose and mouth. Her eyes swept toward the trash bin, which was filled with blood-soaked tissues, the glaring red making her scalp tingle. On the bedside table, our old photo together was particularly eye-catching. Su Ran slowly walked over, picked up the photo, and gently traced her fingers over the happy smiles of the two people in it. Sweet memories of the past came flooding back like a tide, but now, everything had changed. A sudden pain stabbed at her heart, like being pierced by a sharp needle. With trembling hands, she pulled open the drawer, where an old yellow diary lay quietly inside. Su Ran paused for a moment, slowly picked up the diary, sat on the edge of the bed, and with mixed emotions, turned through it page by page. July 7th, 2018. Today, she said yes to my proposal. She cried and said she was the happiest woman in the world. I patted her head, deciding to make her the happiest woman in the world for the rest of my life. Reading these lines, Su Ran's eyes turned slightly red, remembering that proposal day, when I was full of love, earnestly making promises. But now, those vows had shattered like bubbles. February 14th, 2019. On Valentine's Day, I bought a bouquet of her favorite sunflowers and prepared dinner, waiting for her to come home. Every day spent with her was simple yet passionate. A bitter smile appeared on Su Ran's lips. Once I had put so much effort into creating romance, but later, she destroyed all this beauty with her own hands. July 7th, 2020. We've been together for 2 years. I took her to the beach and wrote our names in the sand. I hugged her and said I would love her for a lifetime, and she smiled in agreement. Tears rolled uncontrollably down Su Ran's cheeks, dropping onto the diary and blurring the words. She murmured, "How could I forget what I promised?" October 5th, 2021. She's been increasingly busy lately, always coming home late. When she does come home, she's distant with me, and we're communicating less and less. Did I do something wrong? Su Ran clutched the diary tightly, her heart filled with regret. She recalled that period when she always used work as an excuse, showing less and less care for him. August 15th, 2022. I saw her with Gu Yi, laughing and talking together. She leaned into his embrace, and he kissed her lips. My heart ached so much. What happened between us? Su Ran stared at this page, tears flooding down. She could almost see how heartbroken she had made him back then, while she remained oblivious, continuing to hurt him step by step. July 7th, 2023. Today is our 5th anniversary, but she went to a concert with Gu Yi. She said Gu Yi needed her more and asked me to understand. I understand her, but who will understand me? Su Ran burst into tears, finally realizing how much pain and grievance I had endured during those days. Yet she was bewitched by Gu Yi, trampling my love carelessly. October 30th, 2024. I think I've lost her. Her heart is no longer with me. What should I do? Large teardrops fell onto the slightly yellowed paper. Su Ran raised her trembling hand, gently caressing the handwriting on the last page of the diary, along with the dried, yet still horrifying bloodstain. She didn't know what desperate and painful state of mind I was in when I wrote these words. The remaining bloodstains seemed to silently tell the story of my agony at that time, each trace like a sharp knife piercing straight into Su Ran's heart. Zhang Fan, I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. I was terribly wrong. I deserve to die. Su Ran's voice was choked with tears, nearly breaking. Her body trembled slightly, as if all strength had been drained from her. Then, Su Ran hugged the diary to her chest, as if it was the most precious treasure in the world. She fumbled for her phone in a panic, her fingertips trembling as she dialed the number she knew by heart, desperate to hear my voice. Sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service. Please check and try again. On the other end of the line, the cold mechanical female voice mercilessly announced her hopes in vain. Again and again, it was always that same hopeless empty number prompt. Su Ran could no longer contain herself as tears burst from her eyes. She broke down sobbing, her cries echoing through the empty room, filled with pain and regret. She paced back and forth anxiously in the room like a trapped animal. Suddenly, as if remembering something, she abruptly stopped and dialed my mother's number. At that time, my mother and I were at home abroad, preparing lunch. When Mom's phone suddenly rang, and she saw Su Ran's name displayed on the screen, her hand paused for a moment, and her eyes instantly turned cold. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself down before pressing the answer button. As soon as the call connected, before Su Ran could speak, Mom's long-suppressed anger erupted like a volcano. How dare you call me? Do you know what you've done? You've completely ruined Zhang Fan's life. Mom's voice trembled with anger. Back then, I was so happy thinking he had found his happiness, but I never expected you would hurt him the deepest. For your relationship, how many opportunities has he given up? How much effort has he put in? Yet you turned a blind eye. Now because of you, he's even forced to give up his beloved career. How can you ever make up for that? I stood aside, quietly listening to my mother's angry outburst, with mixed feelings in my heart. At that moment, I deeply realized that in this world, only our own parents would wholeheartedly feel hurt and angry for us without any reservation. On the other end of the phone, Su Ran remained silent for a long time before her hoarse, tearful voice came through. Auntie, please let me see Zhang Fan, I beg you. I have so much to tell him. There must be a misunderstanding between us. I want to explain clearly. Misunderstanding? Mother sneered. After hurting him like that, you're still talking about misunderstandings? If you're really sincere, say it in court. Zhang Fan doesn't want to see you anymore, and he won't take your calls. After saying that, Mother hung up the phone without hesitation. I thought Su Ran would give up after this incident, but unexpectedly, at dusk 2 days later, when I was taking my usual evening walk and just reached my doorstep, I saw a familiar figure. When Su Ran saw me, a flash of joy crossed her eyes. She quickly ran towards me and instinctively reached out to hold my hand. But the moment she touched me, she jerked away as if electrocuted. The smile on her face froze, and her eyes filled with panic and guilt. Do you know how long I've been looking for you? Su Ran's voice carried a hint of urgency. How could you leave without saying a word? And what's with that divorce agreement at home? You can't just leave me like this. Without my consent, we can't get divorced. I know you're still angry about the Gui incident, but that's all in the past. Please forgive me, and let's be like we used to be. Su Ran's eyes darted around nervously. Though clearly guilty, her tone remained as privileged and self-justified as ever. Looking at this familiar yet strange woman before me, an uncontrollable anger welled up in my heart. I let out a cold laugh, and without hesitation, raised my right hand and, with all my strength, delivered a resounding slap across Su Ran's face. This slap is for our tattered relationship. My voice rose with anger, each word forced through gritted teeth. Before Su Ran could react, I raised my hand again and struck once more, the sharp sound particularly piercing in the still air. This slap is for all your false promises. I stared intently at Su Ran, my eyes filled with hatred. My palm was red and stinging from the force, but I still endured the pain and raised my arm for the third time, delivering another heavy slap across Su Ran's face. This slap is for my broken body. What you owe me can never be repaid. I glared at her, my chest heaving violently. I withdrew my stinging palm and stepped back a few steps, creating distance between Su Ran and myself. She covered her cheek where I had slapped her, a flash of grievance in her eyes, but quickly resumed her urgent demeanor. You've hit me and vented your anger. Now come home with me. Su Ran took a few steps forward, trying to get closer to me. You chose to be with me in the first place. You can't just leave like this. I can forgive your willfulness this time. Stop making a scene and come back with me. Su Ran forced a smile, which appeared completely fake to me. Just as she reached out to embrace me, Mom, hearing the commotion, hurried out from inside and pushed Su Ran away. Stay away from my son. Mom stood protectively in front of me, like a mother beast guarding her cub. After what you've done to him, how dare you show up here? Stop harassing him. For several days after that, Su Ran would linger outside my house. Sometimes, she would place a large bouquet of bright sunflowers at my doorstep. Sometimes, she would leave the home-cooked meals that I used to love. But these things that might have once touched me now only make me feel annoyed. Those flowers and meals were all taken away as trash by the community cleaning lady, just like how I wanted to completely throw away this shameful past. On the morning of the 5th day, as usual, I instinctively looked downstairs, only to find that Su Ran was gone. I secretly breathed a sigh of relief, thinking she had finally given up. However, not long after, I received a phone call from China. It turned out that after receiving the evidence I submitted, the court had carefully reviewed it and decided to summon Su Ran and Gui. The reason for Su Ran's sudden departure was that she had to return to China to respond to the court summons. In court, Gui, in an attempt to evade responsibility, strongly denied his actions. And D tried to push all the blame onto Su Ran. He even resorted to his old tricks, claiming that he had a serious mental illness and should not be held legally responsible. However, the court had already conducted a comprehensive psychiatric evaluation of Gui, and the results proved that he had no mental illness at all. Everything before was just lies he fabricated to deceive Su Ran and harm me. When Su Ran learned the truth, she was both shocked and angry. She never imagined that Gui, whom she had always trusted and defended, had been manipulating her all along. She emotionally explained to the judge that she was merely deceived by Gui and had no subjective intention to harm me actively, claiming she was just misled and made wrong choices. However, the surveillance video footage and the audio evidence I provided clearly recorded their process of harming me. With such solid evidence, there was no room for their sophistry. In the end, based on the facts and law, the court convicted Su Ran and Gui of intentional injury, and they were each sentenced to 5 years in prison. Time flew by, and 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. News came from home that my aunt had suddenly fallen seriously ill and passed away. My mother and I, with heavy hearts, embarked on our journey back to China. Back in the city that felt both familiar and strange, I never expected to run into Su Ran again on the street. If it weren't for her familiar voice calling out to me, I would hardly have recognized the haggard and worn woman before me as Su Ran. The once radiant and confident Su Ran now seemed like a completely different person. Her face was etched with the ravages of time. Her eyes revealed confusion and exhaustion. Her hair had become dry and disheveled, and she looked like someone completely crushed by life. Zhang Fan, I knew you would come back. I've been waiting for you. When Su Ran saw me, a glimmer of light flashed in her eyes. She quickly walked towards me, but her steps were unsteady, as if she might fall at any moment. I know I was wrong. Gu Yi is just a liar, and I won't let her get away with it, Su Ran said while approaching me, forcing a smile on her face. But that smile was extremely unpleasant, with yellowed teeth and food debris stuck between them. A sour and foul smell hit me, making me feel nauseous. Seeing this, my mother waved her hand, and the bodyguards immediately stepped forward to stand between us. My mom pulled me behind her and looked at Su Ran with disgust. Stay away from my son, you crazy woman. What bad luck to run into you as soon as we're back. After that, I never saw Su Ran again. But later I heard that after she was released from prison, she found Gu Yi, perhaps driven by resentment and unwillingness, or perhaps blinded by past deception and hurt. One deep night, she broke into Gu Yi's rented room with a knife and stabbed her to death. Su Ran W. as arrested by the police again. This time, she committed an unforgivable crime, and what awaited her was a more severe legal punishment. Shortly after Su Ran's execution, I received a package from within the country. Opening the package, there was a familiar diary inside, the one I had left at home. I gently opened the diary, looking at all the moments recorded inside. Those past laughter and tears, happiness and pain, all came rushing back like a tide, filling my heart with mixed emotions. On the last page of the diary, there were several lines in unfamiliar handwriting. Zhang Fan, by the time you read this letter, I will be gone. During these years in prison, I have reflected countless times on my mistakes. I know that the sins I committed against you can never be remedied. Every day, I reminisce about the beautiful times we shared. Those moments of happiness have now become the heaviest shackles in my heart. I really want to say sorry to you in person, but I know these 3 words are far from enough. I can't find any reason to beg for your forgiveness. I can only repay the hurt I caused you with my life. The harm Gu Yi did to you is irreparable. You loved me wholeheartedly for so long. Taking him away is the only thing I can do for you. Now, everyone who has hurt you in this world has disappeared. I hope you can let go of the past and live well. You deserve happiness, and I can only silently bless you from another world. After reading this letter, my heart remained unsettled for a long time. All the past love and hatred turned into a sigh at this moment. I went to the courtyard, lit a fire basin, and slowly put this diary that carried the past into the fire. The flames quickly devoured the paper. Watching the diary gradually turn to ashes, I knew those unbearable memories had finally become